Welcome to part 2 of Principles and Procedures in Education Research. Last time, we looked at the principles that guide educational research, and we looked at validity and reliability, and we did say that validity refers to the accuracy and truthfulness of research, and reliability, we said, is the consistency of research. We also looked at objectivity and rigor in education research. We also looked at ethical conduct in educational research, and we did say that before you carry out any research, you should have the informed consent. Also, you should look at the confidentiality and anonymity of the people who are involved in the research. And also, we say that you should minimize harm, and you should be honesty, and you should also have integrity whenever you are carrying out research. We did also say that the results that you get should be able to be generalizability, or they should be able to be transferred or transferability to the entire population. Also, we looked at scientific inquiry, which is systematic inquiry that we apply when we are carrying out educational research. Today, I want us to move to the procedures of educational research. These are principles that are followed in a sequential manner. Research that we are doing in education follows a given sequence or a given procedure. And this procedure is also conceptualized as a research cycle. And the first thing in research cycle or in the research procedures, one, identification and the formulation of the problem. The research process begins with the recognition of a difficulty, a curiosity, or a gap existing in knowledge. In education, this could be a practical classroom challenge. For example, why are students disengaged during the online lecture? Or a theorized puzzle. For example, how does growth mindset influence resilience in mathematics? The researcher refines this broad area into a specific, focused, and researchable problem statement. And this step is foundational, as a poorly refined or defined problem leads to ambiguous and ineffective research. Number 2, literature review. We talked already about literature review, and once the problem is identified, the researcher immerses themselves in an existing scholarly work through journals, books, conference papers related to this topic. The literature review serves several vital functions, as we saw. So, majorly it prevents reinventing the wheel, helps refine the research problem, identifies the theoretical framework, and can guide the study. And this reveals the methodologies that have been successfully used by others, and it situates the new research within the ongoing scholarly conversation. Number 3, you specify the research purpose and the question and the hypothesis to be used. Based on the literature review, the researcher clearly states the purpose of the study. This purpose is then translated into specific, actionable research questions. And this one is mostly common used in qualitative research, or testable hypothesis, common in quantitative research. Hypothesis is a predictive statement about the expected relationship between the variables. For example, students who receive collaborative learning instruction will show significantly higher achievement scores than those who receive traditional lecture-based method. We talked about hypothesis in detail in our last class. In this class, we are not going to dive deeper. Then, part 4 of the procedure in education research. It is the research design and methodology. Here we will take much of our time because as a researcher, you are supposed to understand this part of research design and methodology. This is the blueprint for the entire study. The researcher makes the critical decision about the research approach. You ask yourself, will this research be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed, which mixes both quantitative and qualitative? You'll also make a decision about the research design. What is the overall strategy? Will it be experimental? Will it be a case study, a survey, an ethnography, or a longitudinal study? Also, the researcher has to make a decision about the population and sampling. Who are the participants in the study? The researcher refines the target population and selects a sample using a method, either random sampling, purposive sampling, that allows for valid inferences or rich insight into the population. Then, which methods are going to be used for data collection? This could involve tests, questionnaires, interviews, focus group, observation, or document analysis. Now, I want to delve much deeper into this area. What is research design? And I did say that this is the architectural blueprint of the inquiry. It is the detailed architectural plan that transforms a research question from an abstract idea into an empirical, actionable study. This requires the researcher to make a series of deliberate, interconnected decisions that justify how the study will be conducted to ensure its findings are credible, reliable, and meaningful. It is a persuasive argument demonstrating that the chosen path is the most appropriate for answering the specific research question. The first thing the researcher has to look at is the philosophical compass of the study. And what is this philosophical compass or researcher's philosophical worldview? This includes the positivism, pragmatism. I look at each of these terms when I consider the kind of the data I want to collect so that I can be able to explain what is positivism and pragmatism. When I'm dealing with the quantitative approach, this approach is rooted in the positivism paradigm, which posits that the social reality is objective and measurable. It seeks to quantify variables, establish relationships, and generalize the finding from a sample to a larger population. When you do that, you will be dealing with the philosophical view of positivist paradigm. And the purpose of this is to test the hypothesis, determine the causes and effects, and make predictions. The data form you use in the quantitative approach is numerical data that can be subjected to statistical analysis. This data includes test scores, survey responses on Likert scale, attendance figures, or graduation rates, and many others. An example of a study that is using quantitative approach is a study investigating the effect of a new program on first grade reading proficiency scores. This will use quantitative approach to measure and compare numerical scores between the groups. The second part is the qualitative approach. This approach emerges from the constructivist paradigm, which views reality as a socially constructed and subjective. It aims to explore understanding and interpret complex phenomenon in their natural setting. The purpose of this approach is to explore a process, understand experiences, or generate a deep contextualized understanding of a particular issue. Here, the data we use is in form of rich texture or visual data. This includes transcripts from interviews, focus groups, field notes from observations, photographs, and official documents. An example of a study is a study seeking to understand the experience of first-year teachers in high poverty schools. This kind of a study uses qualitative approach to capture their personal stories, their personal challenges, and have employed several coping strategies through in-depth interviews. Then the third approach is the mixed method approach. And as the name implies, the pragmatic approach integrates with the quantitative and qualitative components within a single study. The core principle is that the combination provides a more complete understanding of the research problem than either approach of the quantitative or qualitative alone. The purpose of this approach is to provide convergence validity. We call it triangulation, or use qualitative data to explain quantitative results, or develop an instrument based on qualitative findings. The design variants that are used in this method are convergence parallels, collecting and analyzing both types of data simultaneously, then merging the results. Also, we have explanatory sequential. This means that starting with a quantitative phase, then using a qualitative phase to help explain or elaborate on the initial statistical results. Then we have the explanatory sequential, beginning with the qualitative phase also to explore the topic, then using the findings to develop a quantitative instrument or hypothesis for the second phase. Then let me look at research designs. Research design is a master plan that outlines the logical structure of inquiry. It specifies how the research will be organized to maintain internal validity, that is the accuracy of the conclusions, and external validity, that is the generalizability of the findings. The first design I have is experimental design. This is the gold standard for establishing the cause and effect relationship. It involves manipulating independent variable and observing its effects on dependent variable. Sometimes you call it outcome variable, while controlling for extraneous variables. The key feature in this is the random assignment of participant to an experimental group which receives an intervention and a control group which does not. Then the second design is quasi-experimental design. The quasi-experimental design used when random assignment is not visible for ethical or practical reasons. It still involves an intervention but lacks a random assignment, making causal claim more tentative. Then I have the survey design. This is a non-experimental design used to gather information about the characteristics, behaviors, or opinions of a population by administering a questionnaire or an interview to a sample. It is ideal for describing trends or determining the current status in a given population. Then we have case study. This is a qualitative design that involves an in-depth contextual analysis of a bounded system. A single case or a small number of cases. The case could be an individual, a gifted student for that matter, or a group, a teaching team, or an institution, a single school, or a process, the implementation of a new policy. Then I have also an ethnography study. This is a qualitative design rooted in ethnopoligy, where the researcher immerses themselves in a cultural setting for an extended period to understand the shared patterns of behavior or beliefs, patterns of language of groups from insiders' perspective. Then there is what we call longitudinal design. This is a design that collects data from the same subjects repeatedly over an extended period of study development or study trends for a long term effects of an intervention. So all these studies or designs are used in educational research. And as you develop your research prowess, you might want to use each one of them in the future. But you'll start with one of them that will suit you to do your research. Then after you are finished on the research philosophy approach, looking at the philosophy you are going to use, then the research design you are going to use, we come to a very important area: population and sampling. This component specifies the participants of the study and the rationale for their selection. The population. This is the entire group of individuals that the study is all about. For example, you are doing a study on effects of teachers. Then in that locality, like you are doing in Bungoma, then all the teachers in Bungoma will be the population of interest for your study. Then we have the sample. This is a subset of the population that is actually studied. Now you look at the teachers, but you might be interested on secondary school teachers only. And you have the ECT teachers, we have the primary school teachers, we have the secondary school teachers, and even college teachers. But you might be interested only on secondary school teachers. So these are the people you are going for to pick as your sample. So it's a subset of the population you are interested in. Now, how do you pick? How do you get this sample? There are methods that are used for picking the sample. They are what we call probability sampling. Probability sampling, whereby every member of a population has a known and a zero chance of being selected. This is essentially for quantitative studies aiming for statistical generalizability of their results. Methods include simple random sampling, stratified sampling, and cluster sampling. Then there are those methods that are called non-probability sampling. The selection is based on the researcher judgment or researcher convenience of access. This is a standard in qualitative research, where the goal is not generalization of the research, but rich information heavy data. And some of the methods which are non-probability sample include purposive sampling. This is selecting participants specifically because they have experience with the phenomenon being studied. Another one is snowball sampling. This is asking the initial participant to refer other potential participants. For example, you might be studying on pregnancy in schools. So after you have finished one with one, you ask the participant to refer you to any other person in that school during that very locality, in that very locality, who has also been in the same problem. So there is a referral system. Somebody refers you to the potential person who qualifies to participate in the study. Then we have convenience sampling. These selected participants who are easily accessible, and this has significant limitation for generalizability. So we move now to also another important area: data collection methods and instrumentation. This is operationalization of the study, detailing the specific tools and the procedures for gathering the data. We have several methods or instruments that are used in collecting data in education research. The first instrument is tests and assessment. These are standardized achievement tests, teacher-created exams, or psychological inventories. The key is to report, establish reliability and validity. Another instrument is questionnaire used in service, and this is a set of written questions. They can be closed-ended or open-ended. In closed-ended, we have multiple choice questions and Likert scales for qualifications, or open-ended, where we have a brief qualitative response from the participant or a participant in the survey. Another instrument is interviews schedules. Interviews. So in the interviews, we use interview schedules. And in the interview schedules, we use structured interviews, and also we have semi-structured. You use this guide, but you have a flexible guide with the flexible prompts, or unstructured, where you just have a conversation format, but you're taking notes. Another instrument or method we use is focus group. Focus groups is a form of a group interview that capitalizes on groups dynamics to generate data on collective views of individuals and the meanings behind these views. We have also observations where we use checklists. Observations where we use checklists. When we want quantitative data, we will use checklists. But we can also have unstructured narrative for rich descriptive qualitative explanation from the field notes. Finally, we have document analysis. This is the systematic evaluation of existing records, such as students' portfolios, curriculum guides, meetings, minutes, policy documents, registers in a school, those documents that are used in accounting in the school. They can be analyzed through what we call document analysis. So when you have all these and you are able, you can choose. You can't use all of them at a go. You can use which one is appropriate for the kind of the data you want. Then to ensure quality of your data, there is what we call piloting. Piloting. It is a critical, often overlooked step in research, but this part is very important. It will help you to refine these instruments or these tools, and it will make them to be up to date. This is usually carried or with a small, similar sample, and will allow the researcher to check the reliability, the consistency and the stability of the instrument one is using. You can use test-retest method to check the reliability, or use internal consistent measures like Kronzbach alpha scale to check that an Kronzbach alpha of 0.8 and above is recommended. Also, we use the piloting to establish the validity, the accuracy of the instrument. Does it measure what it claims to measure? Does the instrument measure what it claims to measure? This includes content validity. For the content validity, you go to the experts in that area, and they will have to guide you that this is a good instrument. And also, when you carry out the procedures and you carry out the piloting, it will refine the procedures in your study, identifying confusing questions, logistical problems, ethical issues before the main research or the main study begins. So it's very important that as a researcher, you have to carry out a pilot to your study and have reliability calculated, either using test-retest or using other methods to see that actually the tools you are using, the tools we mentioned, you are using actually are good enough to go. Then, we've not finished. After you have done your pilot study, now it's time to carry out data collection. This is the operational phase where the planned methods are implemented to gather empirical evidence from the field. Rigorous administration is crucial here to maintain consistency and avoid introducing biasness. Ethical protocols must be observed, such as ensuring you have the informed consent and also observing the confidentiality of your participants. Then we finish collecting the data. Data analysis as a stage in education procedure. Data analysis is the systematic process of transforming raw, chaotic data into meaningful patterns, insights, and answers. For quantitative data analysis, first of all, the quantitative analysis, we do data preparation. Raw data is cleaned, coded, and I will show you step by step in the next lecture on how to do it. Then we move to, after data preparation, we move to the descriptive statistics. And this is the first step of making sense of the data. And it involves summarizing and describing the basic features of the data set. We look for the measures of central tendency, the measures of variability, and also visualization of the data. Also, we move to inferential statistics, where we have the data to have the predictive power. We use various tests, for example, t-tests, or we use analysis of variance, that's ANOVA, or we use correlations, or we use correlations, regressions, correlations or regressions. We also here, in order for us to make our work easy, we use softwares. And the commonly used software is the Statistical Package for Social Sciences, SPSS. They allow for efficient data management, complex statistical calculations that will be prohibitive by hand, and the generation of pieces of tables and graphs. The researcher's key lies in selecting the correct test and interpreting the outputs, particularly the p-value, which indicates the probability that the observed result occurs by a chance. We will see a p-value of less than 0.05 is conventionally considered as statistically significant. Qualitative data analysis is an inductive and interactive process aimed at building theories or themes from the data itself. So in this, we prepare the data, then we do coding. This is the fundamental process of breaking down the data into discrete parts. The researcher attaches labels with what we call GOTs to word phrases or paragraphs that captures a silent idea. So we have the first cycle coding, initial, often described as coding of the data, and the second cycle coding, organizing the initial codes into broader, more analytical categories. And then finally, the researcher does what we call theme development. The codes are then sorted and clustered into potential themes. A theme is not just a frequent topic, but a meaningful, coherent patterns that capture something important about the data in relationship to the researcher question. Then, finally, the researcher interprets and the constructs. The researcher involves weaving the themes into a coherent, persuasive narrative. The researcher interprets the data, linking the themes back to the literature review and the theoretical framework. Now here also we use software. There is a software we call FIBO. FIBO do not analyze data for the researcher, rather they are powerful data management system. They help store, organize, query data sets, and the researcher can quickly retrieve all the text segments coded as all the segments coded in the data. So in conclusion, in this area, data collection and analysis are the twin pillars of empirical research. Collection is the disciplined act of gathering raw materials with fidelity and ethical care, while analysis is the creative and systematic alchemy of transforming that raw material into knowledge. So after you've done that, the final stage is dissemination of the research. Before we move to dissemination, you must interpret the data. You have analyzed, you must be able to interpret the data. Then dissemination of this data or the findings. This is typically done through formal research reports, thesis, dissertation, or a journal article. The report allows standard structure. The report, what we allow in report, the standard structure is introduction, literature review, methodology, results, and discussion and conclusion. We will see all these. So in conclusion, the principle and the procedures of education research form an interdependent and cyclic system. The principle of validity, ethics, rigor are a moral and methodological compass, while the procedures provide a detailed map for the journey of an inquiry. Together, they empower educators to transition from being passive consumers of information to active generators of knowledge, driving into evidence-based progress, which is vital endeavor in education. So welcome as you take this work serious. I know you coming out as a powerful researcher in education, and you are not just going to just get this information so that it's for fun, but it's for the practical use in education cycles. Thank you. Let's end the lecture today at this point.